Welcome to Relove Guitars, and it was the Wednesday evening. Here we have a very interesting guitar. This is it's beautiful actually. It's beautiful and interesting. And it's a Rally. I mean, pretty guitar, sort of a almost gothic headstock there. Lovely inlays, and we've got a pretty set of fret markers and a lovely hollow body construction. I don't know whether it's got a central block. I don't think it does. I think it's hollow. Could be wrong, but anyway, it's a Rally, and it's a sort of jazz style guitar. Some of you will know whatever the Gibson equivalent of this is, ES something, I don't know. I'm just saying it's a beautiful Rally. So for those who've never come across a Rally before, this is a brand made by a Korean company, manufactured in China, and I first came across them by accident in my early days of looking for and finding interesting, great quality, interesting budget guitars to set up and fall in love with. And Rally came to my attention because I happened to buy a Rally GL300, which is a Les Paul copy, and I bought this guitar and I couldn't believe the quality of the neck on it, and the pickups actually. Those two things were just fabulous. And everyone whose hand I put it into was absolutely blown away by it, and there was a consensus that it was probably one of the best Les Pauls they'd ever played as well, and so on and so forth. Now I thought that was a piece of good luck mixed in with a good setup, and actually I bought a couple more and sold them often here and there to friends who still have them and love them. So, and each one of the Les Paul style ones turned out to be as good, and brilliant quality. Anyway, so I'm just going to put you into the little rack. So hold fire, if I can just do this. Get on there. Yeah, so they've turned out to be brilliant quality, and here is another one. Now I'm going to take this off charge now for the time being, so I'm going to plug in the microphone, which is going to override any second the sound, but hey, we don't mind. So here we go, sound in, that should be microphone sound. So yeah, here we have, please, why did that switch that off? Thanks a lot. Go back, continue. Yeah, weirdly it didn't like the changeover on the fly, so it's conked out. Right, so anyway, so I just became a real fanboy of these Rally GLs, and I haven't had one for a few years for myself. I keep buying them and eventually selling them on, and that's not actually because they're not worth keeping. It's just that I've had too many of my own guitars around to warrant keeping an extra one, which doesn't get played much. So I've sold them on and regretted it each time. And the other day I found one for 99 quid at Rich Tone Music, bought it. No, decided not to buy it, and then David saw it. I sort of gave people a heads up on the Relove Guitars Facebook page, and David saw it and bought it, and it's become immediately his favourite guitar. And then he bought a couple more, and now he's bought this one. So it's come to me, and here we are to set it up now. So the couple of things make this interesting to me. The first one is it as good as, or as unusually good as the Les Paul versions of the Rallys? And I can't really tell just now. It's very pretty. It's quite a high price. I mean, the Rallys I was getting around 100 quid mark. I've paid up to 199 for a Rally, and that was a brand new one, lemon burst one. But this one I think is £250, and I think I've seen it on sale, listed a couple of times over the last year or two. But anyway, it turns out to have been owned by a gentleman whose wife had it up for sale, and he passed away and never played it, and pretty much looks like it. It's got plastic on the pickups, which I am going to take off, by the way, because nobody wants to leave plastic on their car seats. It's so distinctly uncool. But you know, and David's seen it and played it, so he knows it's brilliant. Yeah, so it's in for a setup, and the reason why it's in for a setup is because it comes with the usual, very, very standard list of things that make it impossible to play. And I guess the first one to note, and this is really interesting from the point of view that David is a really good case study, because he's a newcomer to playing guitar, and of course he's currently in his crazy spend, falling in love with guitars and spending a lot of money. Nothing wrong with that. But he's new to guitar playing, relatively new. So when he brought this to me, we met up and had a little rehearsal. We're playing some music at his wedding later in the year, and he brought this along for me to take away and set up. And his report on this guitar is that it just wouldn't stay in tune, or couldn't get it into tune, and he spent loads of time. And that's a classic example of the plastic nut letting the guitar down. But I was really interested in how even though he was brand new to guitar playing, he already knew that he couldn't play it, and he'd put it down and go and play the Rally GL300 that I set up for him a couple of weeks ago, which he thinks is the best guitar he's ever had in his short guitar career. Anyway, so that's a really good example of how a newcomer to guitar playing experiences the very standard fitting of a plastic nut, which stupidly ruins what is otherwise, you know, potentially a superb guitar. Now this came with a really high action too, and the bridge was out of place. Because it's a floating bridge, it wasn't in the correct place. It was off by a couple of millimeters, but it threw the intonation out, and we're going to have to check it more carefully in a minute. But that's a sort of downside of the floating bridge. So for a beginner, this could be a daunting guitar, because how would you know how to get it and stay in tune all the way across all the notes on the fretboard? Well, you might not be able to. It might be too difficult. But apart from that, super high action, slightly sharp frets again here, quite common. Yeah, high action, can't get it in tune. Basically, those little details there are enough to put this thing back in its case and not get it played. And that, to me, just sums up the kind of lunacy, really, of making guitars and believing that this will do from a manufacturer's point of view. And I guess I've said many times before in the past, why do they do it like that? Make it into a guitar that could be potentially beautiful, but actually starts out as a dog. Why do they do it? Because I guess they figure that people will carry on buying them anyway. Maybe that is the case. So this guitar is going to get the fix for those problems. And the first, what have I done with it now? The first part of the fix is it's going to get the custom adjustable tusk nut, which we know well. Thanks to inflation, these have just gone up by about 30%. Even though I get them at a slightly reduced value, the price now has nearly cancelled out any benefit I get from having a trade account. That's inflation for you, and it's a damn sight more than 2%, I can promise you that. So it's going to get an adjustable nut. I'm going to lower the action down, and I'm going to file the ends of the frets, level the frets out to make sure it plays just like the other one, because in a sense, as far as the fingerboard goes and the pickups, it's not really that much different from the GL300. So I'm going to do a couple of checks. Now, I have to tell you right now, the action is way lower than it was originally, but it's got some unhappy buzz, which we're going to take care of. So there's quite a bit of uneven fret stuff going on here that needs sorting out. So crappy nut, way too high action, underlying uneven frets, sharp fret ends, and a floating bridge that moves. Bit of downers for a guitar like this, but it's going to be a beaut, because it's just a handsome beastie. So I'm getting Daniel sending me questions about truss rods. Anyway, I can't really answer them just now. So I'm going to do what I normally do, which is I'm going to set this to the desired action doesn't really matter what it was too high, and that's a fact. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to remove the truss rod cover, and we'll check the amount of relief. Now this guitar, I'm pretty sure has 10s on it. I'll just have a little look and feel. So I think I put hybrid 9s actually on the Rally GL300, and it might be that we go with 9s on this, being a shorter scale or a Les Paul scale, but just, you know, I'm trying to make stuff that feels easy to play for David's newish fingers. Now here we have a Rally, and what we don't know is how they fitted this nut into the end of this neck. If it's like some of the vintages, the danger could be that it's, sorry about me appearing in the video, I don't like to, but occasionally. Come on, could we please zoom when I ask you? Yeah. So the question is, okay, it's not lacquered over, it's clearly glued on the end. The question is, how is it glued in place by the fingerboard? So let's have a look. We don't know, you see? If I tap it and it gives any sort of resistance, then I'll be fairly sure that it's could be glued in by the finish. And the problem with this is if you tap it off, and it is firmly glued in by this black finish and the clear on top, which on some cheaper manufacturing processes that's what they do, then we've got a problem because it can break the finish and delaminate some of it. There's a bit of goo here that some muck's got on here, but okay, let me just check something. So I'm going to check the relief. Not a very good view. Switch to the outside view. Yeah, right, the relief is pretty flat, so I'm okay with that for the time being. So let's just move off the strings out of the way, and I will start with tapping this nut. As we do this, what I'll also do, look down there, I'm going to, whoops, before I do anything, I'm going to mark where the bridge sits so that I have a bit less of a faff when it comes to replacing the bridge later on, because I know where it is. Just a little sort of make life simpler type of thing. It's not going to be a perfect way of marking it, but it's better than nothing. In fact, it's not very reliable at all. What a day today has been. Now, I mean, it's been terrible, partly because, a very big part because what's going on in Ukraine still. It's looking desperate today. I've been trying to avoid looking at it because, I'll be honest with you, the more I look at what the Russians are doing, the more I feel my my anti-violence feelings kind of disappearing, being replaced by rage. Not rage as in anger at any soldiers, but anger at one person who thinks it's important enough to kill children and sacrifice lives for a principle that, I don't know, it seems to be about ego or status or whatever it is, I don't know. But even still, what is it that can be worth that much to do what's going on? You know, he's put an existential threat on people. There you go, nicely fitted, thank you. So easy off, and that goes straight in the bin, because it's at no time in my life am I going to want to put on such a grim, horrible thing. So I'm going to go over here and get one of my number 3 basses, tall one, because this looks quite a long drop nut. So you can see it there. I'm going to start by I've got a few things to do to prep this. The first one I'm going to do is I'm going to sand down the feet, the grub screw feet, which might mean moving this. I'm going to sand those down so that I start out with flat feet, which helps to spread the load onto the adjustable nut base. It's a 3D printed thing, so the plastic isn't massively brittle or hard. So what I don't want is the grub screw feet, even though they're what's called cup point, they're still a little bit, have a bit of potential to dig into the plastic, which I don't want. So I'm just going to use the careful work with the sandpaper to take them down to a flatter, smoother spread, and that will just spread the load a bit better and help to minimise the cut in that they do. So that's good. I'm happy with that. I know. Sorry, this thing about talking about doing a guitar and then veering off into war is a strange thing. Apologies in advance, but like I said yesterday, I honestly don't really know how I can avoid doing it. Actually, how can you just get on and pretend it's not happening? I don't think you can. Actually, I just don't think it's right between all of us to pretend that, to be just doing a setup and pretending I'm not thinking about it a lot of the time, because I am, and I absolutely know a whole pile of you people are as well, wherever you're from. Somebody was saying, a British commentator was saying today, in fact, I don't like the guy myself, but there's a reporter called John Sweeney, who's done some interesting things in the past, but I don't have a lot of respect for him. But he did say something today that was very, very important, and he pointed out that the fact that in a country where, first of all, what he said was, I think it was on LBC radio, but he said, he cited 4 names, and he said these people all have in common, 3 of these 4 people, he said, have been killed by the Russian state or by Putin, as far as any evidence we can see points to. And again, I know you might not believe that, and you may have conspiracy theories of other things, but whatever. If you believe anything from your own country, and if you don't, well, then you can't really decide what the hell's going on anywhere, because there's no point. But anyway, as far as can be determined, those 3 of those 4 people have been killed for being in opposition to Putin and his plans. And the other one, Alexander Navalny, is currently in prison after having been poisoned twice, I believe, in an attempt to kill him as well. And so what he pointed out, the reporter John Sweeney pointed out, is that in a country where it's very obvious to anyone that protesting will at least get you thrown into prison and quite possibly get you killed. The fact that 6,000, I think it was, people came out and were arrested in protest at Russia's movements is quite staggering. It's far more telling than seeing, protests in a Western country where protest is tolerated, permitted, whatever. Okay, so just as I'm going on here, I might as well mark my frets up right now. So first of all, I know that the nut is sitting at the right height. I know that because I've wound it in completely and wound the feet in. So at its lowest, it leaves the strings on the first fret, which is where I want them to be. And then the reason for that is then I'm going to dial them up to the correct action, to the correct first fret action, by using the grub screws. Now, different guitars have different depth of nut shelves, and if it's a shallower nut shelf, then I would either sand more of the base off the nut base, the 3D printed bit, or I would use a smaller one, which my pal Gerard has made a range of sizes for that very purpose. But so as it happens, this is kind of on the scale a bit like the Epiphone's basic 3D printed base. Seems to fit pretty well. If it starts off with strings too far above, then I would sand it down a bit more, but it seems to be right on the mark. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put in all the strings, get them under tension, get them tuned up. Okay, so some of them are, I think they're all touching the first fret. Now what I'm going to do is, I can zoom in on this. Oh, I'll get the wrong damn thing every time. I'm doing it backwards, you see. So what I'm going to do at this point is I'm going to dial up the nut using the grub screw. The hex key is what I need to say. So I raise it up a little bit, and then it's got its perfect first fret action, which only needs to be as much as it needs to be to work, which is obvious, but you know, as I mentioned in yesterday's video as well, people say, how much do you need? My answer is just slightly more than nothing how much relief you need, because you don't want much. You can have a very flat neck if you want. But you need room for the strings to move. That's not sitting on the saddle. Yes, anyway, so you need just enough to allow the strings to move. And the thing you probably work out, the thing that's probably not too difficult to work out is that if you have a very low action and a very flat neck, you may create it so there isn't enough room for your strings to move. And in which case you'll find you need to either raise the action to give the strings space, or you keep the action the same and dial in some relief, some curvature into the neck to create that space for the strings. You can have low action and flatter neck if you have well level frets. Yeah, so, you know, John Sweeney was pointing out that in a country where you will be arrested for slightest kind of protest, for 6,000 people to come out and be willing to do that is quite astonishing, and it tells you just how serious the feeling against the military occupation or war and now massacre by the looks of it in Ukraine actually is. So and I think it was damn, I've forgotten who it was. Was it one of the Klitschko? No, it was a, oh, I can't remember. Somebody was saying, somebody was saying that people need to get out in the street in Russia. For every one arrested, there needs to be 2 more people taking their place, and actually, and saying that there is no time now to be inactive on this. You have to take action, and the more I see happening, the more I'm feeling I'm losing my caution even about the inherent risks, you know, that we've been worrying about since the beginning of Putin's instability and his potential for resorting to insane nuclear war. And actually there comes a point, it's starting to feel like is life at any cost worth it if there is such suffering? You know, and that's kind of starting to make me feel radicalized in that sense that, you know, I in many ways have spent my life avoiding conflicts, you know, or being very grateful for not growing up in a world of conflict. But I'm starting to ask, you know, is there a point at which what's, you know, our continuing to live, you know, in a world that isn't melted down in a nuclear blah blah blah, is that really worth it at any price? At the price of these innocent people, these freedom-loving people being shelled with every type of weapon that Putin will throw at them, while the whole of the sane population of Russia, particularly the younger people who have more information and are probably less susceptible to the propaganda, state propaganda, you know, have a better chance of making up their own minds, are clearly against it. So you can see, by the way, switching back to guitars, I have now got the action as low as I wanted at either end, with a nice little bit of curvature in the neck, just enough. And now I'm going to use my fairly fresh on yesterday 400 grit paper to just about do the first track. So it's the E track, as I like to call it, the high E track. And this first bit of sanding will show me something straight away, which is very interesting. It'll also, I'm going to lower down these pickups for a minute, because they don't need to be this high anyway. Now I've lowered the action, they're too high, they're a little bit too high, but yeah, so, you know, at what point do you go, actually I can't live with this anymore, I can't sit here in my so-called, where the hell did that go? Sorry, my so-called peaceful home, while people are being killed. I can't live with myself, which sounds a bit of a strange psychological statement, but this is conked out. I don't know why. I'm going to start it again. It doesn't seem to want to play ball with me today. Right, so I can thankfully go back and rely on the overhead camera. So what we've got here, look, is we've got cutting, tiny bit, none. Low fret, low fret, low fret. Look at that. 3 low frets, 4, probably 5, 6, 7. So cutting here, not cutting all the way along there. Look at that one. Pow. A supremely high one there. And then a mixture of probably quite low there, just starting to be a bit higher in the next track. So that tells us that it's a fairly uneven set of frets. I'm going to put this back here and hope that the damn thing might stay running when it's running there. So what I like to do at this point, even though I've done the first bit of level, I want to test it, because actually I only need it to play at the action I've chosen. I don't need it to play down to completely flat. See? So you see that zinging? That ties in with this low fret here, these 2 low frets. So the reason that's zinging is because these, when you fret on there, it's lower than all the rest, and so it can't clear the next fret, even though the next fret is technically the correct height. It's because we're playing in a dip, and that's what I've discovered over time is the biggest influence, if you like, on the playability of a guitar, is the fact that we're sort of all used to uneven frets. Actually, what we sort of get used to is the idea of high frets, and so we've noticed that our guitars buzz and choke, and then we attribute it to a high fret. Well, a great deal of the time this isn't actually the case, although it's hard to figure out why. So more often than not, the buzzing and choking that we experience is caused by a low fret, not a high fret. because the low fret makes the next one relatively high, and it produces the exact same effect as if it was sticking out a mile high, because compared to the one before, the next one is a mile high. Now notice how we freed that up. So I've bottomed out the low spot, I've bottomed the ones around it out till the low one is now not so relatively low. Tiny little bit up there, so I'm going to focus on doing the last bit of levelling right at the top there. So you can hear with your own eyes how that solves the problem. So I'm going to now focus on just this little patch up here where I know there are a couple more low frets causing us a bit of problem. So when I say concentrate on this or focus on this, I'm sort of putting a bit of downward pressure to basically impose the curvature of this rod onto the frets here so that I can fix that uneven problem. And there's quite a lot of cutting here. These are very uneven frets. Now, I have to say, this is not consistent with most of the Rally GL300s and the GL300s and the GL400s. So that plays, okay, that's really good. Happy with that. But to get it, we have had to do quite some levelling. And I'll take you a slow tour and I'll try and get you the best view. Okay, so as I go along, look at how much I've had to do and how different it is on some. That's hardly any. So there's where I bottomed it out. There's the big problem. Look at that, a low one, but we got away with that. That's the 5th fret, but we've only got away with that. So that's when you fret that, it goes down in the dip. But we've got away with it because we've taken a lot off this one and some off that one to bottom out this dent, this valley here. And then you can see there's another one there on both of those, and we've had to bottom the next frets either side, including this one and this one, to bottom out these two low spots. So you can see what the game is. And then up here it seems to kind of go all over the place. We're not, a bit of a low spot there, and then we've had to bottom out we've had to do quite a bit of work here to bottom out these frets so that there isn't any buzzing there. So it's an amazingly revealing process. This fret leveling method tells you what's going on. So we're only on the E track at the moment, and it's taken all of that to clear up the fret unevenness on the E track, which is cool. You will hardly notice it when I've re-crowned the frets and polished it all out. So, but you can see the sheer difference between a flattened fret here and a completely untouched one there. That's causing a major problem. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch to the B track, and I'm going to carry on leveling down the B track, down the beaten track, in the same sort of way, and I pretty much expect to see that pattern of unevenness more than likely will continue, although quite often it does change as you go across the radius of the guitar neck. But more, if something's really high to begin with on the E track, you'll tend to see it carry on into the B track usually. And what I'm seeing here is we've still got a low one here at the edge, but it's now picking up, it's coming back up to the correct height. This one here is now low in the middle, this one's high in the middle comparatively, so we're cutting the ends here, we're cutting the middle there and no ends here and no middle, so it's all over, and this one's completely low and it's not being touched by anything. So we might find in the B track we're getting a problem of some choke or buzz, I would say possibly here and possibly here. But that's we've got a good heads up on where we're likely to find it, because it's obvious. A little bit around there, but getting there. But getting there because I've already taken a fair bit of material. Now, when I say that, one of the things when you do this, you need to be confident that what I'm calling a fair amount of material isn't pound for pound that much. It's not like ruined the frets or done anything particularly bad. But again, that judgment about that has to come from a fair bit of experience of knowing when you've reached the sort of point at which you don't really want to take any more. So this one here is incredibly low. It's amazing how low that one is. So that's as much as I'm going to do. These two are completely low by comparison to everything. So it may have been deliberately done by somebody in the factory as a maybe one of those fall away things that people would like to do, but I can't be sure. Now, next stage, we're going to do the G track. That's good. They're not choking on bends, although I can't make too huge a bend, but I don't think we've got any bend chokes, which is pretty good for a change. So now I'm going to calibrate again for the G track, and I keep recalibrating now as I go along. Make sure that the curvature in the beam is the same as an ideal version, idealized, perfect version of this neck. So we know the neck is really like that. As you can see, it was up, down, up, down, up. And this is smoother than that. It doesn't go up, down, up. So what we're doing in using this, we're sort of taking away any high spots, we're bottoming out any low spots, but at the same time, using this beam, I'm also imposing this curve, this smooth curve on the sort of peaks and uneven bits. So we're sort of evening it out at a gram scale as opposed to the individual fret by fret scale, which we're also doing. So it's a kind of an interesting way to think of the process, because sometimes there comes a time when I'm doing this that I need to do this very lightly, because what I don't want to do is distort the beam. What I more want to do is let this slight curve, this nice smooth curve of the beam, take care of the ups and down bumps, and it's sort of slightly different mentality when you're leveling. Sympathetic vibrations there. You might want to investigate something to put over there. I think they sell little kind of furry straps that you can put across there. I don't think anything would do actually, but a piece of sticky tape or anything. But yeah, it does produce this sympathetic vibration-y thing that can be quite annoying. So I'm okay with the G track. Now I'm going on to the D track, and I can see already the D track needs to be a little bit more curved than the G track. So I add a little bit more curvature, a tiny amount, but you get used to spotting it when you're on the mark, which I am there. So now we're going to go along and level the D track in the same old way, and we just keep going right the way through to the end, making sure that everything plays at the level of the action that we've chosen. And that's what makes this fret leveling approach different from the ones I learned first of all, and it's why I continue to do it this way. And I like this method because unlike all the guitars I had as a youth, this method is the one where I tell the guitar what the action I want is. And I make the frets comply with that, because the frets are the only thing really getting in the way of that chosen action. But on most guitars that you have as a kid, if you remember, the frets dictate what you can and can't do. The frets dictate what you can and can't do, and because as a teenager, for example, you might not know about fret leveling, so you just have to live with it, and you end up basically raising your action or lowering it as far as it can go until it runs into buzzes and chokes, and then you tend to back off and raise it again until they disappear, and that's what you're stuck with. So we're not doing that. We're telling the guitar the action that we want, and then we're beating the frets into shape after that, and doing it with a method that saves, achieves the level we want, the minimum of fret metal loss, which is why I continue to use this method and why I swear by it. So what I find now is when you've set a low action and a flattish neck, what you'll tend to find is you'll be leveling to clear up all the notes as you heard on the first higher strings. As you come down across to the fatter strings, you'll be leveling less, probably less for individual high or low notes, but more for what I call fret slap, which is that, which appears on all the strings or all the frets in a clump, not just in one place. Flat spot about here, I think, which we might not bottom out. There comes a point where you instinct or experience tells you to back off and live with it, but we're not quite there yet. So at this point I'm going to just kind of gently use the file, and I want to pose the curve of the file gently onto this whole fingerboard. See if we can just about get down to a workable level, bottom those out, but I don't think we are going to, so we're going to have to leave it and see. We'll do one more calibration for the low E. Yeah, so I don't know, I've been doing that a lot, thinking, as I'm sure many people have, about where do I stop worrying about, I know it sounds crazy, but the future of the planet and all this, I'll do anything to avoid war or nuclear war, or you know, and we kind of many of us grew up thinking that was the best way to think, and you know, in some ways I can still think that, you know, anything, there's no, you know, any resort to nuclear weapons or taking a risk is a stupid thing to do, no matter how bad the situation is, because if anyone uses them, the planet is doomed. But you know something, the planet is in trouble anyway, and now we've got an example of a power broker throwing his weight around, mainly because everybody is too scared to physically get involved, because he's warned us off. Nearly there, apart from the little bunch up that top area, which I'll take care of if I can. So yeah, it feels like, what are we protecting? You know, we're holding out so we don't get this nuclear war thing. But how long do we hold out? I mean, do we allow Putin to go after Moldova or Lithuania or whatever? You know, where do we stop? And I know that people thought the same stuff before the Second World War started. Of course they did. You know, this is why the sort of natural tendency is to appease for a while and hope that we've misread it, and hope that he'll be satisfied with this or that. And eventually became apparent to the British government that not only had they a moral duty to help defend Poland, but because Hitler was absolutely explicit in what he was going to do with the world, i.e. everybody was subservient to the German race, and you know, so on and so on, and everybody, the Untermensch would be used as slaves for the master race, yada yada. You know, and so he helped things along, because no matter how much appeasement you kind of fell for or you attempted to go for, it was clear that it didn't take long before it was evident that actually this is going to be your fight after it's been, you know, Poland's fight. It's going to be yours, and you'll be fighting for your existence in the same way. And I think even knowing that, you see how long it took for the people or the government of Britain to face that fact and do the unthinkable, which was join in a modern world war, which nobody would believe for a second it wasn't going to be hugely destructive, deadly and costly and so on and so on. But there was a point came where they just knew that if they either do it now or they are going to be, you know, they'll do it when the paratroopers are landing on Britain, or, you know, on the beaches or wherever in the fields and whatnot. So, but it, you know, the thing was how long it took them to reach that place, that point where they faced up to that reality. And I sort of feel like we're in that place at the moment, you know, not really wanting to deal with it and wanting to hope that, you know, the sanctions will do this and take care of that. And I don't know, I mean, it's not very realistic. I mean, the only one thing is Putin hasn't said, and then I'm coming for Poland, and then I'm coming and I will make the British, those pesky British people who wouldn't let me have my money in their banks, I'm going to turn them into slaves in my diamond mines or whatever. He hasn't said that, so in a sense I can see why we're still doing that game, that self-delusion that well, we can pretend it's not directly relevant to us, can't we? You know, can we just get on with stuff as normal, can't we? And maybe it will go away. But you know, the logic would be, okay, so then if he did stop at Ukraine, what are we saying? Oh well, it wasn't important enough, you know, 10, 20, 100,000 or whatever it is, civilian Ukrainian lives was a fair trade. You know, we've got our world peace and he's got what he wanted, and 100,000 innocent civilians have to die. Is that okay? Could we look ourselves in the eye? Do you know, I don't know if we can. It's a horrific trade, and I really don't know how we could live with that trade. And then if we could live with it for now, you know, where is the next point? You know, where's our limit? Looks like the British government before the Second World War. Where was the, you know, Sudetenland, that was okay, you know, you know, annexing Austria. Well, all right, maybe, yeah, maybe that was historically very Germanish, you know. And of course Hitler was born there, so, and then Poland, which was a mixture, I think, of the sort of historical commitment that we had made. That just the shame on the British government would be so great if we would have ignored that and walked away from it. There was the commitment, but there was also the growing awareness by the, I think anyway, by the time that came around, the growing awareness that the inability to avoid just exactly what Hitler had said very clearly about his plans for Europe and probably the world. You know, for whatever, the unthinkable happened, and you know, I don't know about you World War II buffs, but I get goosebumps, not a good kind particularly, but I get goosebumps of, you know, major significance every time I hear the no such undertaking has been received. And therefore, as of 11 o'clock this morning, we are at war with Germany. That you can hear the absolute horror and reluctance to want to have had to say that in his voice. And you know, I feel like we're in the Sudeten land, selling the checks down the river. This period of time, you know, many people just hoping it will go away, hoping that Putin will get what he wants, and that will be enough, and that they can sort of, they can rationalise it with themselves, you know, being, well, you know, it's better to let that happen than to have a global thermonuclear war, you know, and you can say, well, species-wise, maybe it was, you know. But it does bring you that question: is living worth any price? That's the real question, and especially when the price is being paid in other people's lives. I can imagine it's easy to say yes, it is, if it's not your life being threatened, or your children being killed in a basement. So, and all the places throughout history that have found themselves under the boot of some oppressor, all of them reach a point, at some place in their history, they reach a point where it's no longer worth it. Peace at any price is not worth it, and often that's because the aggressor gives them no choice, and clearly that's where Ukraine is right now. There is, apart from surrendering absolutely outright, there is no choice. It's either surrender or fight. I mean, that's an obvious binary opposite, but, and so the Ukrainians, to their, you know, to their credit, I suppose, are resisting. But then, you know, some smart ass kids of the future who weren't in that situation may judge them and say, well, you should surrender better that 100,000 civilians and children didn't die because of your particular preference not to live as a Russian part of Russia, which most of you don't want to be. But is it worth? Is the idea of your freedom as a fledgling democracy, is that worth 100,000 lives? Well, all I know is that we are not qualified to answer that question while we sit out here in relative peace and safety, far enough away from the mayhem and the killing. And I think maybe I got a funny feeling that maybe if I was there, like everyone else, I'd have the choice. You know, you either stay or you try and run for the borders or whatever it is you do, or you can say, look, I'd rather be Russian than dead, red than dead. But actually, if you were living there and it was a choice between being forced into a system where you couldn't protest against Putin, where you had to vote for Putin, where Putin and his cronies continue to enrich themselves from your natural resources and your labour, is that not worth fighting for? I know it's a horrible choice, and you know, I wake up every day at the moment just grateful for not having to make it right here and now today, but part of me hopes that I would have the courage to stay and fight, terrified though I would be by the thought of war and the insanity of it. But what are you living for otherwise? If you can't take a stand on things that matter. And I think that about the Ukrainians, and I have to say, I scare myself by thinking that I think that of the West, stupid distinction, binary distinction, of the rest of Europe, that says, or you know, the people who say of the rest of Europe that we should go all out and close a no-fly corridor to save the civilians in Ukraine. You know, and I know nobody does because they're terrified that Putin will strike out with nuclear war and that'll be the end of life on the planet. Well, all I know is that while we live in that terror, then we will sit by. And I wouldn't believe, you know, 30, 40 years ago, I can't imagine how I would have come to that conclusion. I guess my younger sons and stepsons would probably go, well, that's because you've lived your life, you old fart, you boomer. It's easy for you to say. But it's not easy to say. It's certainly not easy to contemplate if that choice was staring you in the face. It's just a horrendous. But that's, you know, what we know is that there are good, real good, decent human beings just like you and me making that decision, that awful decision right now, and going through with it, and finding the courage to go through with it. And you know, my heart goes out to them, and my respect for the decisions they make in that terrible situation is overwhelming. It almost doesn't matter which. If you choose not to stay, you know, I, who have not been in that life or death situation, cannot judge you, and I respect whatever it took to make that decision. And if you choose to stay and overcome your fear, like I'm looking at my fear of Putin's threats and dying in a nuclear holocaust, you know, of course the Ukrainians are calling for the West, the rest of Europe, to take, you know, to risk the nuclear horror to use an air corridor to protect them. Of course they are, because they're going to die anyway. The distinction, the nicety of making a distinction that we have the luxury of making, you know, of imagining was dying of a nuclear holocaust is a terrible thing. Well, it is compared to sitting at home doing a guitar, or in a workshop doing a guitar setup. But if you're sitting in Ukraine, in Kyiv right now, waiting for the massed onslaught of the Russians after their massed rockets and thermobaric weapons and all that stuff, you know, what horrors would a nuclear war hold for those people who are looking at staring their deaths in the face in the next 12 hours or sooner? You know, why would they be afraid of, you know, a nuclear war? They need to do everything they can to safeguard their loved ones and their liberty, as they say it. And of course, their shrunken options, of course, don't translate into meaningful options for us. And I know that when Boris Johnson is talking about there won't be any air corridor, air cover or air overflying bans or whatever, I know, you know, we know that he's appeasing and he's trying to talk tough whilst running scared of the playground bully. You know, because the consequences of standing up are potentially disastrous. You know, we can't hide away from it. But you know, the question is, do you just carry on living under the whim, you know, the whim of the dictator? Or do you risk trying to stop him, and so you die, but at least you die knowing that you overcame your fear. And that's what I know, that the Ukrainians who stand up to him will at least be able to say, and you know, even in the front lines, is I've overcome my urge to run away. Like the Prime Minister, President, whatever he's called, you know, when offered a helicopter or escape flight out of there, he said, just give me ammunition, that's what I want, not an air ticket. And you know, he must have made the agonising decision, like any man, even even though somebody not in his position with the means to be rescued by a friendly government, you know, every ordinary citizen must have made a version of that same gut-wrenching decision, and I just, you know, bow down to his courage in making it, even if it results in more destruction. You know, he set an example, and in his example he's saying that maybe life at any cost isn't life, you know, under any conditions isn't living. And you know, here we are at the moment, not really having to deal with it in the same way, but yes, actually dealing with it in the same way, because you know, my sort of stomach turns to ice when I think of, you know, all the years I grew up as a child in the 60s with the threat of the Cold War turning into sort of Dr. Strangelove type global thermonuclear war, with some idiotic, despotic ego kicking it all off almost by accident. And that was very real, you know. We had drills and we had books telling us what to do, and you know, the BBC did that, When the Wind Blows. I mean, that was critical of the idea of nuclear war, but the truth is, my dreams were haunted by it. I have had so many nightmares as I grew up as a kid and into adulthood, actually. Yeah, see, that's my canister of cellulose thinners making a noise. But yeah, I actually remember the dreams as a child. I had terrible dreams of the end of the world under the shadow of mushroom clouds, and you know, I've sort of shaped part of my life on this planet, and you know, even thinking of that, I guess I never thought we'd be back there, even though the risk has never really gone away, because we still hold those weapons, and there's still, you know, some chance of a fundamentalist regime or crazies getting hold of those weapons. It's sort of being kept in check a little bit, but you know, to find ourselves back there under a real spectre of it. You know, my reaction is at first rage, and then I have time to examine my fear a bit and note how disabling it is, and then start to think, do you know what? I don't want it to be that disabling. I don't want to be a cowering, you know, life at any cost type of individual. So I'm changing my perspective. And I think, like I said, inspired a bit by just the mind-blowing courage of I watched Vitaly Klitschko, is it, the boxer? Him and his brother are both mayors of cities, or well, he's a mayor of a city and his brother's whatever. But what happened to my? Sorry, I'm just looking. I seem to have lost my. Run out of my those things, micro mesh. I seem to have got a very old set all of a sudden, and they were new a minute ago, 5 seconds ago, but they appear to be very old, so I must have lost them somewhere. That's a 1500, and I seem to have worn that out doing something. That's a 2400. 12,000. That's a better looking set. No, it's not. It's worn out there. What have I done? It's got gold on it. I seem to have worn through. Maybe it's because I put these in water or something, that and cleaned them and washed them. They've maybe become somewhat disconnected. Anyway, yeah. So there we are. So I think what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go into the polishy mode, which is always a bit noisy and crap. I'm going to put the kettle on, have a cup of tea, coffee or something. And then we'll come back, stick the nut on, clean everything up, and basically restring and stretch out the string. So it's not a complicated setup, but everything in this setup is going to fix everything that's wrong with this guitar, which, as I said at the beginning, is quite a lot in terms of, it's enough to stop David, for example, wanting to play it, and that just shows how big a problem it is. I'm also going to try and use some of this number scratch remover followed by the clean and shine, and I'm still not convinced what's actually in here. So if I look, oh right, this is brown stuff, pasty gooey stuff. So it's got looks a bit like a G3 compound, whereas this one, it just looked like clear liquid last time I looked. And if I'm not mistaken, when I squeeze it up, it is pretty much clear liquid. This says high gloss non-abrasive, so that's probably why it's got no stuff in it, but I'll use a bit of this and see where it goes. Right, I shall come back to you. While I'm off, I'll charge the phone up a bit as well. So see you in a short while. Okay, here we are. Oops, I've fallen over. Here we are, putting the strings on. Everything's done, back to stringing time. So a little bit fiddly with this strange bridge, so I put a sort of retainer thing on, keep the strings on. Just what you get sometimes with those trapeze bridge affairs. Can be a little bit difficult, so I've just put a bit of Gorilla Tape across there to hold the string balls in place while I tighten up, and I'll just pull the strip of tape off afterwards when all's said and done. I'm just listening to the Moral Maze on radio. Oh, I've unplugged the damn thing. Come on. Thank you. Just listening to the Moral Maze on Radio 4, trying to discuss the situation in Ukraine. And it's interesting that it seems a couple of the people, young lady on it, I don't forgotten her name, but her position seemed to be that risking nuclear war is the ultimate in bad, the ultimate not goodness, and so you should do everything to avoid it. I mean everything, including not, if Putin says don't fly planes, then you don't, because you're duty bound to avoid nuclear war more than anything else. And I guess that's a kind of logic I would have had ages ago, on the basis that I would have said to myself, hold on a minute, I would have said to myself, this is the wrong way around. I would have said to myself that the net good of avoiding the horror of that was more important than any other consideration, and therefore if somebody had to lose their freedom in pursuit of not having nuclear war, then so be it. It's unfortunate, but that's the sort of trade, and I'm not entirely sure I can uphold that point anymore, that point of view. It just doesn't seem right to me. Anyway, I don't know. That's, as I said, it's all a bit hard to make sense of. I just sense that it's not straightforward. And by the way, in these videos, I don't want to hear from any people who think they've got it all sussed out to the point that they're going to scream and shout and tell me what a nasty, weak English person I am, and how they rescued me in some other war or some other thing. We don't need that right now. We need to unite as human beings, really, to try and minimise the destruction. Funny thing is, I spent a hell of a lot of today dealing with really contentious parish council issues in my neighbourhood, and that's like a little war on its own. It's bitter. It really is bitter, because there are vested interests of a certain group of people who've made it their business that whatever happens, they don't want there's some inevitable development coming. And certain people have either struck a deal that it's going to be in a particular place, so it helps somebody sell land, or there are other people involved who, for whom that solution is perfect, because it means that the development won't happen next to their home, so that whatever the moral rights and wrongs of that choice, they're backing it because they just don't want the thing anywhere near their homes, etc. Now I've managed to wind down this action somehow. I really don't know how I did that. Maybe when I was cleaning the thing, it happened. Oh well. We'll do it up while the going's good. Yeah, so, you know, obviously it's contentious, and, you know, whatever the ethics of the people involved are, it's a very difficult thing to accept. But you know, because there's so much riding on it, you know, and it means to somebody who gets the development slap bang in front of their home, it means their rural idyll is gone forever, and it means that they can't sell the house. It doesn't got the value it used to have, because now it's got maybe a sort of what looks like a housing estate of some sort, albeit not a massive one, but still, you know, that kind of development. And so of course nobody wants that particularly, but also it appears to me few people, other than a few of us, who we actually stood for election on this exact platform, and that was that it has to happen transparently, and if it comes down to be outside of my kitchen window, then so be it, and that's what I will accept. And it's a very, very difficult, very difficult situation, because people are very stressed and they've become very single-minded, and as far as I can see, the people who are going after their own personal interest are doing it just all out, regardless of the effect on anybody else of anything. They're just going, fighting for what they need. You know, and it seems that there's no length to which they won't go, which is quite saddening. I've seen it's descended into slander, defamation, and so on, all focused entirely on getting the outcome that they want more than anything else. It doesn't matter what they do or who they hurt, as long as it doesn't get built there. And you know, I've been saying, with me and some colleagues who stood on the same platform, have been saying since the beginning that if you can hold us to our word, we will go wherever the evidence says there's the right place for it to go, and if that's outside of my window, then I will accept it without complaint, only providing that the evidence is visible and can be tracked through to show that that's the right choice and why it's the right choice. The amazing thing is, we're not even talking about you know, something as terrifying as, you know, somebody taking away your freedom, and this is just about housing values and pretty views and what you thought you were going to have forever, but now it's turned out that it doesn't look like you're going to have it forever, and now you're damned if it's going to spoil your view, and if it's got to spoil someone's view, well, you know, the angle on it is, well, everyone else is going to fight for to preserve their property value or their view, so why shouldn't I? Why would it expect me to roll over? You know, and of course, all sort of sense of community just vanishes at that point. So I've been kind of swimming in that for a couple of years now, and it's got more intense over the last year and over the last few months as we get closer to trying to put together a plan that states or proposes the right few potential areas for development, but even that has been hijacked continually by people who want to short circuit it and resolve it or settle it onto the location of their choosing. I'm afraid that's all you can say about it. But you know, I guess what I'm saying is you can see how bitterly people will fight for their, not rights exactly, but you know, fight for what they want, and you know, it's no surprise that you know Ukrainians will fight even harder for their, oops, that's no good, fight even harder for their land and their freedom. Well, have it. So I'm going to do some stretching. Do some stretching. I'm going to play this at home tomorrow. I've got two guitars to play at home tomorrow, briefly. This bridge is moving while I'm stretching. That's not such a great thing, but I can't do anything about it. Yeah, I'm going to play, do a little sound recording of Martin's blue AV. No, it's an AV. It's a V6 Strat, vintage V6. I'm going to do a little sound recording of that one because it's got some very top quality pickups in there in a sort of Dave Gilmour-esque loaded pick guard, and so I'm going to do those. This bridge is awful. The saddles are leaning backwards and pulling the front of the saddles up. Yeah, and I'll do a sound test of this as well. So more stretching. So here we go. I'm going to go behind the nut. It might have been a good idea to, behind the saddle is what I meant. Might have been a good idea to have perhaps stuck down the base of this bridge with a little bit of double-sided tape. That's always one way. It's actually fairly easy to know where it should be. But if you don't want to learn the way of measuring the scale length, David, when you come to change strings, I suspect you might be bringing it back to me. But if you want to do it yourself, you can do it by putting some tape down and measuring the start point. This thing actually, it kind of feels like it could do with a bit of sticking down because it wants to sort of move that way a little bit, but it's not too bad. So I'm going to call it quits for now. Oh, hardly detuning, you see. Okay, quite low action there, so I might just tweak up the tiniest bit there. But it's great how little you need to do. Beautiful. The only thing I will do now is, this is the proper way to check where the bridge should be placed, or if it's in the right place. And that is by, I don't know why, I've got a bruise on my arm. I don't remember hitting anything. Perhaps my wife has been beating me in bed. Just saying. So I'll see if I can just rest it on there. Too close by miles. Okay, so that's how you you can do this. It's clumsy, but we can do this lying down. I know people will complain. So it's tuned to E on the harmonic ping on the 12th fret. Then fret it, and it should be E. Now you can see there, it's E on the 12th fret ping of the harmonic. Fretting it, it's quite a bit high. That means it is this E saddle is too close to the nut, so I've moved it back a bit, clear a chunk, and now I'm going to check it again. So we're going to probably have to Might have to retune, that's okay. That's the right length. There you go. By luck, we got the right length. D's a bit long. That's because it's a bloody changeover. I hate these bridges, I really do. Let me just tilt this up. This does not, really does not like this kind of stringing. This bridge is weak, well, not ideal. So so we need to bring those forward. The problem with that is, of course, is that they're the wrong way round, so we can't really we don't have much room to bring them forward. That's it, I'm now out of adjustment room, unless I take the whole thing off and replace them. So I don't like this bridge at all. The wooden bit's not a problem. The fact that it's floating isn't really a problem. It's the fact that it's a tunematic bridge which is the problem, and it's very difficult to get the required intonation adjustment out of it, but I'm trying. Still too long. This really is the wrong kind of bridge for this thing. So what I'm basically doing, David, is I am positioning the bridge by using harmonics, because instead of measuring physical distance, I'm using sound to tell whether we're in the right place or not. What I don't like is the fact that these saddles are all leaning backwards, because that's what they tend to do on tunematic bridges. Yay! Baby. That's right, man. That's right. It is too short. Bottom three are right, top three are now wrong. Let's send these back, shall we? It appears to me that they're all back to front. So, yeah, the standard pattern is 3 and 3 staggered. The D comes forward of the G, and the E, and the everything goes back from there. So E is the shortest, B the next, G the next, D comes forward of the G a little bit, and then goes back to the A and back further to the low E, and that's where we are now. Yay! Yay! That's what you want to do, is to mark this with a little bit of tape. That's the right position. I think the problem is if I stick it down, it's actually quite difficult to, might be quite difficult to get it back up. So leave it there for now. If you're nervous about it, put a little bit of tape either side, and then you'll be able to relocate it. It might be in a very thin little bit. I mean, I'm just going to put a little bit down here. I'm going to give you a head start. Well, you don't want it on there because it's ugly, but when you come to change the strings, you want to put a little bit of tape on so you can mark where it is. Right, so that's it. That is it, set up and done. Beautiful. I'm going to raise the pickups, or just tweak the pickups into a sort of balance. Now, we don't really want them to be massively high, and we don't want them to be massively low, but as always, the principle is just one of rule of thumb, which says the closer they are to the pickups, the closer the pickups are to the strings, the more output you're going to get, but the less tonal dynamics you'll have in the sound. The further they are, the less output you'll get, but the more tonal dynamics. So it's swings and roundabouts, and the only way to really know is to go back and try it out for yourself. So there's the bridge working away at its perfect height, doing its job perfectly. Bridge nut, I meant. There's your very low first fret action, now very, very low, and you can adjust it if you don't like it. Frets all leveled, oh hello, frets all leveled all the way down. Down we go to the untouched pickups, the annoying bridge, which is now in position, and the slightly fiddly trapeze business for fixing the strings on. End your 4 controls. Isn't that a beaut? That is the Rally. I don't know what the model number is actually, but that's it for now. Thanks for watching. See you again very soon. Oh, well, actually, no, we haven't gone anywhere. Wait, I'll see you tomorrow for a little sound test. Okay.